Hi, I'm Leela O'Day, the Technical Director at Frog Environmental. We've come onto site here where we've been working a number of years just to show you a few of the silt control devices that we commonly use. This is a fully biodegradable mat made out of coir, and what you'll see on the top surface is that we've coated it with a gel flocculant product. This gel flocculant helps to bind the silt particles, removing them from suspension in the water. So this will both treat and capture sediments as they're running through a ditch. The floc mat is placed sideways in a ditch so that it is perpendicular to the flow. It's really important that as the water travels down through the ditch system, that it comes into contact with the mat. We need it to be treated by the gel flocculant. If we were to place this lengthways in a ditch that is this size, you can see it's not quite wide enough, and there is a possibility that as the water is travelling down the centre of this channel, it hits the leading edge and rises and comes around, bypassing the mat. Not only does this avoid treatment, but it also has a potential to cause scour along the toe edge of the embankment here. A single mat is rarely used on its own. We're often using them in sequence, whether that's with other floc mats or with other products as well. So it's really important to think about how they might sit together. So once the first mat is placed in, you can place a second one. It's worth working from downstream to upstream when placing mats, because what we want to do is have the leading edge underneath the uppermost mat. There's about a 10 centimetre overlap here. So once they're in, we might need to secure them. In a nice low flow channel, it might be we can get away with it, but in most scenarios we're going to have to stake them or weight them in place. We can do this in a couple of ways. Using sandbags, which can be positioned across the leading edge like this. And this. When we're using a sandbag, we're trying not to displace the flow from the centre of the channel. So think about where you're going to position them. We don't want them to block the flow. That's not what we're after. So think about putting them either side of the main flow so that the water is diverted through the centre. Alternatively, we can use like an engineering pin, and again we just stake the leading edge. We'd recommend just 2 stakes per mat or 2 sandbags per mat. So essentially the system starts to be created like this, and you can have mats in series to each other to extend the treatment. When we're using gel flocculant mats or floc mats, we're really using them to polish when we're putting them in a ditch. So we would expect the turbidity to be around 200 NTU or 100 milligrams per litre. We're not attempting to remove bulk loading from a ditch using mats. They would essentially fill up too quickly. So we would have to think about using additional treatment upstream if we're having to treat very heavy sediment loaded water. As is their function, over time the floc mats will start to become encrusted in sediment. The silts are going to be bound into the coir and be drawn all the way down to the bottom, and they're also going to start building up on top to create sort of a 5 centimetre deep silt layer. At this point, the likelihood is they're not functioning anymore. We've got to think about a maintenance regime. You might notice that the downstream water quality isn't as good, in which case check the mats, make sure that they're still operating as you thought they would, and if they are, look further upstream to see if there's any changes on site, which means that the water is more dirty as it's flowing down the ditch. But we are naturally going to end up with these built up with silt. So we've got to think about the maintenance and what we're going to do in time with these mats. Now, as I've said, they are completely biodegradable, which gives us amazing resource to reuse them on site, creating more of a circular economy and enabling us to also have some really good biodiversity enhancements. The mats, as they are coir, can be used to stabilise banks such as this exposed soil here. So they could be literally removed just onto the side of the bank where we've got exposed material, seeded and left in situ. Another great use for these mats is if you're going to be planting hedgerows or trees, they can become the planting pallets. If you're putting them down along the bottom of a hedgerow, you can plant through them and it's going to offer natural protection to the soils, increasing the moisture, increasing the fertilisation and just generally enhancing the performance of the trees as they're being planted, protecting them from weed growth, so they're also a weed suppressant. Alternatively, maybe they could be left in situ. So for example, on this site, we've been leaving some of these mats within the sediment ponds in the low flow channels, and these have now become abundant with reed growth and they're supporting a huge amount of aquatic wildlife. So again, they have added a biodiversity enhancement and reduced waste being moved off site. So there's many different things you can do with the mats, but you do have to think about them as something as part of your materials management plan, essentially. How are we going to reuse these? How are we going to move these around site? But to take them out of a channel is also going to be a consideration. You're going to need to remove the weights. Obviously protecting downstream, because as you do this, there is going to be some sediment mobilisation. Whilst the mats are going to be containing the majority, the downstream will have some silt. So you might want to think about doing this on a dry day or putting in some further measures downstream so that we're protecting ourselves from the good work that we've already done in collecting this. Bearing in mind these mats are now going to be about 50 kilograms, this isn't going to be simply a case of picking them up and dragging them out of the channel. So what we're tending to do is fold them a little bit so that you're making the mass smaller. And this enables us to put a lifting strop underneath and work with a machine driver who then has the capability of physically removing these out of the ditch and removing the risk of manual handling. If you do have to manual handle them, then you're going to have to think very carefully about the slope of your ditch, how you're going to move things safely onto the edge. Again, we've done that, but using lifting strops and several strong people.